In 1967, in a scrapyard just south of Detroit, workers took one of the most advanced cars America had ever built and fed it into a crusher. Not one car, dozens of them. Hand-built, Italian-bodied, jet-age machines that could run on almost any liquid you could pour into the tank, even tequila. Chrysler had spent nearly 30 years and a fortune building them. People lined up by the thousands just to ride in one. And then Chrysler deliberately destroyed almost every single one. For decades, everyone's repeated the same reason why. There's just one problem. It's wrong. This is the story of the car that whispered like a jet, and why the company that built it chose to burn it. To understand the crusher, you have to go back to the late 1930s, long before the bronze car existed. While most of Detroit was building pistons, a small, almost secretive group of Chrysler engineers became obsessed with a different idea: putting a turbine engine, the same basic technology behind a jet, into an ordinary car. The man leading the charge was an engineer named George Hubner, and the appeal was simple. A turbine had almost no moving parts compared to a piston engine, about 1/5 as many. No pistons slamming up and down, no radiator, no fan belt. It barely needed maintenance, and it never needed an oil change. But here's the part that sounds like science fiction. A turbine didn't care what you fed it: diesel, kerosene, jet fuel, heating oil, perfume. If it could burn, the engine could run on it. Through the 1950s, Chrysler quietly tested prototype after prototype. To prove the thing actually worked in the real world, Hubner drove a turbine car clear across the country, New York to Los Angeles, years before most Americans had ever heard the word turbine. Then Chrysler took its turbine fleet on tour, barnstorming city after city, handing rides to thousands of curious Americans. The reaction was electric. People didn't just like it, they wanted one. So Chrysler made a decision that would lead eventually to that scrapyard. They were going to build a real fleet, put it in the hands of the public, and find out if America was ready for a jet-age car. This is the car they built, the 1963 Chrysler Turbine Car. The design came from Elwood Engel, a stylist Chrysler had poached from Ford, which is why, if you think it looks a little like an early Thunderbird, you're not imagining things. Every line leaned into the jet-age fantasy. Turbine blades echoed in the wheels, taillights shaped like afterburners. The bodies weren't even built in America. Each one was hand-formed in Italy by Ghia, the same legendary coach builder that bodied Ferraris and Maseratis, then shipped to Detroit, where Chrysler dropped in the engine. And the paint had a name: turbine bronze, a deep metallic that, in person, looks almost exactly like root beer. Under the hood sat the star of the show, Chrysler's fourth-generation turbine, the A831, around 130 horsepower, but the numbers don't tell the story. This engine spun at speeds a piston engine could never survive, up to 60,000 revolutions per minute at full tilt, and it didn't rumble like a V8. It whooshed, a soft, eerie sound people compared to a vacuum cleaner or a distant jet. The exhaust wasn't even hot enough to burn you. Now, one quick myth to kill. This wasn't a jet in the way a fighter plane is. There was no flaming thrust shoving the car forward. The turbine simply spun a shaft, which turned the wheels through an ordinary automatic transmission. But the multi-fuel magic was completely real. To prove it, the president of Mexico reportedly ran one on tequila. Other drivers tried Jack Daniels. It just kept running. It felt like the future had arrived early. And to find out if the public agreed, Chrysler did something no carmaker had ever tried. Instead of locking these cars away with engineers, Chrysler gave them to regular people for free. It was called the User Program. Chrysler built 50 of the cars and loaned them out to everyday Americans, 3 months at a time, no charge, the only cost being whatever fuel you put in. Over 2 years, 203 ordinary drivers in 133 cities across the country got to live with a jet-powered car. Teachers, salesmen, housewives, mechanics, men and women ages 21 to 70. And wherever one of these bronze machines parked, a crowd formed. In driveways, outside diners, at gas stations where the attendant had no idea what he was looking at. By the time it ended, the fleet had racked up more than 1 million miles in the hands of the public. As a marketing stunt, it was genius. Chrysler got a coast-to-coast wave of free publicity and a mountain of real-world data no car maker had ever collected. And the feedback, people loved the smoothness, they loved the sound, they loved telling their neighbors they were driving the car of tomorrow. But living with the future, it turned out, came with some very real problems. For all the magic, the turbine car was a difficult thing to actually own. Just starting it could take a careful, multi-step procedure, nothing like turning a key on a normal car. Acceleration was leisurely. 0 to 60 took around 12 seconds, slow even for the time. It was thirsty, especially crawling around town, and it could get fussy at high altitude, and there was a fuel problem hiding in plain sight. The turbine ran best on unleaded, but in the 1960s, nearly every pump in America was pumping leaded gas. Then there was the cost. Because each body was hand-built in Italy and each engine used exotic, heat-resistant metals, building a single turbine car reportedly ran around $50,000 or more, at a time when a normal new car cost $2,000 or $3,000. In today's money, that's roughly $500,000 per car. So Chrysler was left with a strange result. A car the public adored, that was slow, thirsty, complicated, and wildly expensive to build. The experiment was over, and now the company had to decide what to do with 50 of the most famous cars in America. What they decided still makes people angry today. When the program ended in early 1966, Chrysler reclaimed the cars. Then it destroyed 46 of the 55 it had built. Most were burned and crushed in that scrapyard south of Detroit. Only 9 were spared, and for decades, car enthusiasts have explained it with one simple story. Chrysler crushed the cars to avoid paying a massive import tax on those Italian Ghia bodies. It's repeated everywhere. It sounds logical. There's just one problem. It isn't true. The historian Steve Leto spent years researching these cars, interviewing nearly everyone still alive from the program, and he traced the tariff story to its roots and found it didn't hold up. Import duties on cars back then were tiny, averaging around 2.5%. On a body worth about $20,000, that tax would have been pocket change, not even close to a reason to destroy a fleet of priceless prototypes. So why did they really do it? The answer is less dramatic and somehow more human. Like every automaker, Chrysler had a hard rule. Experimental prototypes never go to the public for keeps. These cars were nearly impossible to support long-term. There were no parts on shelves, no mechanics trained to fix them, and Chrysler was terrified of one specific thing. They knew that if these cars got loose, owners would eventually yank out the priceless turbine and drop in a cheap V8, a 318, maybe even a Hemi, the car of the future, gutted in someone's garage. To Chrysler, that was the real threat, not a tax, but the slow, undignified ruin of the thing they'd built. So rather than risk it, they sent them to the crusher, cold, corporate, and final. But here's what almost everyone gets wrong about the ending. The turbine dream didn't die in that scrapyard. Most people think those 9 survivors were the end of the story. They weren't even close. Chrysler kept going. Through 7 different generations of turbine engines, they quietly slipped them into pickup trucks, cab-over trucks, even ordinary-looking cars like the Aspen and the Volare. There was a working turbine car running somewhere at Chrysler for years after that famous bronze fleet was gone. By the late 1970s, they'd even teamed up with the US Department of Energy, and they had solved most of the old technical problems. So what finally killed it? A pileup of forces. Tightening emissions laws the turbine couldn't quite meet, stubbornly poor fuel economy, the sky-high cost of building them, the oil crisis, and then the knockout blow. By 1979, Chrysler was nearly bankrupt and went to the US government, hat in hand, for a massive bailout loan. The government agreed, but with strings attached, and one of the conditions was that Chrysler kill the expensive turbine program for good. So in the end, it wasn't a tax, and it wasn't really even the engineering. The jet-age car dream was switched off in a deal with Washington. The last 2 turbine cars Chrysler built were simply handed over to the government, and that was that. And yet the dream never fully died. One of the engineers from that secret turbine team, Sam Williams, went on to found a company that builds jet engines for aircraft and missiles. The technology flew after all. It just never made it onto your driveway. Today, just 9 of these cars survive. A handful still run. Jay Leno keeps one and drives it like Chrysler always hoped someone would. They're the last echoes of a future that was promised. A future where the car in your garage might whisper instead of rumble and run on whatever you happen to have lying around. Chrysler built that future. Then they crushed it. If you'd never heard this story, you'll probably like the one on screen now. Another American machine that should have changed everything and didn't. Thanks for watching.